Alright guys, this is the second part of my Reading Reddit series. We're gonna dive deep into some ghost stories. You can see the lights are dimmed, right? It's raining a little bit on the outside and it's Halloween night. So what better night than that to read ghost stories? And that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna read the Reddit/Ghost Stories subreddit, and I hope we'll find a few serious creepy stories. So what I did is, to get you guys in the mood, is I've invested serious money because I want to make this like a real Halloween themed show. So I've bought some pumpkins, and I bought one first, and then I thought like, okay, I'm not gonna even put it in the scene, like it doesn't even work. Put it in. So I bought a second one, which I've got right here, and I think like this, you know, if I put it here, at least we've got a pumpkin in the picture. I think that's how it works, right? People put pumpkins in pictures and then everything gets spooky. It's like a guarantee for spookiness. It's a beautiful pumpkin, I gotta say. Look at this. Exemplary. Are you spooked yet? No? Well, let's read the first story then. A Malaysian Chinese ghost story. This happened in the late 1990s to me. During the Asian financial crisis, the lack of jobs caused me to move out of my hometown of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and moved north alone to Penang to start my career as an accountant with Dell. I rented a room with an old lady in an old part of Penang called Gelugor. Imagine an old area with old Chinese/English colonial houses, many over 100 years old. Penang is an island that was colonized by the British government in the 1800s. Malaysia is in the Southeast Asia, just above Singapore. Being a young person and Dell going through an exciting startup stage in Asia, the work was interesting but also demanding. It is not uncommon for me to work at Dell headquarters and return home past midnight. In Chinese culture, there's a ghost festival called the Hungry Ghost Festival. This occurs in August, and the story goes that ghosts and our ancestors come to visit the living during this period, and we often put out food for them. Anyway, one night when I was working late, a few days before the start of the festival, I encountered this strange event. I usually park my car across the road from the house where I was renting a room. When I got out of my car, I saw this very old man with dark, weathered skin slowly cycling towards me. Now this is very late in a very quiet part of town, and in my many months of working late, I have never encountered a single person this late in the day. So this was unusual to start with. Then he stopped in front of me and he spoke Hokkien, the local Chinese dialect with which I was trying to pick up then. I didn't quite understand him, so I answered in my standard way in such encounters in Penang by asking whether we can converse in Mandarin, the official Chinese language. Instead, he asked whether I could understand English, which I then replied I could. As clear as today, he asked the exact following question. Do you know where people go die? With the missing two. So that he didn't say the two. I remember being shocked, and I stammered back an apology and replied that I didn't know. With that he nodded and nonchalantly cycled slowly away. I quickly entered my house, the full sense of shock hitting me and noticing that it was precisely midnight then. Locking myself into my room and peeking out into the street with a pounding heart. It took some time before I could get to sleep. To this day, I cannot fathom whether that was really something paranormal. For another year of working very late many days, I have never encountered another soul whenever I returned home. Ooh, that is creepy, huh? But I appreciate that that person kind of reflects and says, hey, it might just be like an old man who's slightly confused. It might just be that. It's definitely a creepy encounter. Not sure a ghost was involved, but it's definitely something that just stops you. If you never see a person, and then in the middle of nowhere, kind of in a very quiet part of town, like this old man just cycles towards you. Ooh, it gives you goosebumps, right? Not necessarily anything paranormal, but it's creepy. It did give me chills. Let's move on. This one is called Farm Boy. I was little, like kindergarten, starting first grade-ish little. I lived in Germany at the time due to being an army brat. My little sister is 2 years younger than me, so we did everything together. Just like a little backstory for your interest. We lived in a 2-story farmhouse-style home. I don't remember when he came out, but we started playing with a boy, a little older than us. I don't remember ever seeing him, just talking to him and playing other kids' stuff. Me and my sister would later realize that the little farm boy was kind of an a-hole, because he would turn off the lights in whatever room we were in, mostly in our bedroom, and then lock the doors. We would find each other in the dark, scared but a little annoyed. I remember telling my sister to try and find the lights and I'll get the door. They were both next to each other. I couldn't open the door and began to bang on it when my sister, in a panic voice, said that she couldn't find the lights. I was kind of mad scared and thought she was pulling my leg. And she was so small, so I was like, move over, let me try. I felt around the area where I know the light switch to be, but only found wall. Confused, I decided to find the bottom of the wall, use both of my hands, and then slide them all the way up, as high as I could. Nothing. I then told my sister to do what I just did, and I would do the same thing on top. So we would do like a slow zigzag pattern just in case we weren't far enough. Our hands eventually grazed each other, and we realized we couldn't find the dumb thing. So I turned back to the door, ordered my little sister to bang on the door and to scream. We did this for what felt like forever. I was even more confused because Mom should be making dinner right now and Dad would be getting home soon, or he already was. My other older sister were never home, so they weren't on my list. So me and my little sister start to give up, thinking this was our life. In the dark, next to the door, we weren't about to go into the abyss behind us. Then, all of a sudden, our mom came to the door. Dad got us out, and me and little sister were very angry. We thought that they were being mean and meant to do that to us, and started yelling at them. Didn't you hear us? We were shouting and smacking the door. They looked at us confused and said they didn't hear anything. We told them about the farm boy and that we didn't want to play with him if he kept doing that. I have a few more stories about him if you all want to know. I still feel quite miffed about some of the stuff that he did, but we still played with him until we left. The farm boy, yeah? I like that she doesn't say it really, I mean, looking back in hindsight now, the farm boy probably wasn't real. I like that. Actually, I was thinking, let me try something out. Is that any better? Does that make it spookier? This is just incredibly spooky at this point. I did like this story though, even though I'm a bit skeptical towards its authenticity. I'm not sure it's a real story. The way it's written, it feels a bit like someone enjoys writing. I don't know. Sometimes I just got my senses tingling with these posts. It's a creepy story though. Let's move on. My brother saw a creepy clone of mine while I was asleep. Some background before I tell this story. My whole family is sensitive to spirits, and I'm seemingly the only one who isn't. Although my mom and grandma always tell me that I was very sensitive when I was a little girl and that I saw and heard my deceased grandfather talk to me at home or at school. At this point I'm already like, oh, I'm not sure about this story, okay? Because like when you have people that already claim that they are sensitive and they're like, I'm a sensitive person, I can feel, you know, goosebumps on my neck when there are ghosts around. It's like, do you? Or do you just think you can? I mean, kind of, where's the evidence? That doesn't mean that this story is not real, but it's just like if there's a whole family, especially like very esoteric women, sorry, I gotta say it that way, little things are interpreted as ghosts and patterns are being seen that are not really there. We spoke about it in the previous video, but I mean, let's keep reading. So when you were a little girl, you were very sensitive and you could speak to your deceased grandfather. Okay. I never met him, but somehow I knew who he was in a family album. I haven't had any experiences for years. Now to the story. It happened last year. I woke up at 5 a.m. one day and went to the kitchen as usual. And I found the microwave half open without anything inside. So I thought someone forgot probably to close it. I asked Mom, Grandma and brother. They knew nothing about it. And no one had used the microwave the night before. But then my brother told me that he woke up in the middle of the night and saw through the mirror in the corridor the microwave working without anything inside. And he said that he saw me peeking at him with a frowning face. Ooh. Then I quickly hid and disappeared in the dark. The thing is, I was sleeping at the time. We still don't know what that was, and he's also very sensitive, just like my mom and my grandmother. Yeah, I always shat myself when he told me that. Should we be concerned? Ooh, honestly, when I read that out, that literally gave me goosebumps. Like, ooh, man, imagine that. Like, you're in your bed, you're sleeping, and you look through a mirror at night along a corridor, and in the end of the corridor is the kitchen counter with the microwave, and it's on, there's nothing inside. It's just, the plate is just spinning and it makes the microwave noise. And then from just the side, you've got a face peeking. Good God, man. Is this a girl or is this a boy? I don't know. Like, I just have the idea. Is it a girl that he saw then because it's a sister? Oh, yeah, a little girl. So it's a little girl's face, your sister's face, that just peeks around the corner with a frowny face. Ooh, that's creepy, man. Oh boy, that gives me the willies. I mean, looking at it from a rational point of view, you could argue, that it's a little boy. He might have been half asleep, and we know that that's a thing, along the realms of sleep paralysis. You can have these states between sleeping and being awake and hallucinate things. It's not impossible. It's still a freaking creepy story, and some people here in the comments say the same thing happened to them or something very similar. I woke up to the smoke alarm going off. I was exhausted, and since I didn't smell any smoke, I figured someone else might be in the house. I lived with my parents at the time. I was messing around and maybe burned popcorn or something, so I stayed in bed. Maybe 30 seconds pass, and it's still going off, and I don't hear anyone trying to turn it off, so I'm about to get up and investigate when the hallway light comes on. I open my bedroom door, and I see my mom standing in the hallway, staring still with her arms at the side, looking up and staring at the smoke detector. It was above my parents' door. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "I'm waiting for your father." I assumed he was the one who maybe set it off, so I'm like, "Okay, you got this." She didn't answer me, but I was so exhausted, so I just went back into my room, closed the door, and got back into bed. It was only a couple seconds after getting into bed when the smoke alarm stopped, and then the hallway light went out. I didn't think anything of it and went to sleep. The next morning, I asked my mom what the heck she was doing with the smoke alarm, and my mom didn't know what I was talking about. Both her and my younger brother said the smoke alarm didn't go off, and my mom was never in that hall. They both experienced weird stuff that same night, but their experiences were different from mine. I know I wasn't sleepwalking. I was awake. I distinctly remember being awake, and to this day I don't know what to make of it. Sorry, I don't have any idea of what you could have experienced, but at last you're not alone in your experience. Episode 1 of my podcast explains the full story. Okay, I get it. You want to plug your podcast. It's a good story, but I don't know. Went a bit far there maybe with plugging his own stuff. It kind of took the credibility out of it. Let's move on. So this one is called "They Didn't Pray for Him at 12. This happened at my parents' house. This is one of multiple experiences I had when I lived in that house. When I was 13 years old, my older sister had her best friends over since they were going to study for a final exam. My parents were out for a wedding and were staying out the night, and my brother was staying over with a friend's house. So my sister and her friend were upstairs with the door closed, and I stayed downstairs watching TV. After a couple of hours, I heard the doorbell. I looked through the window and saw it was a good friend of my sister named Chris. He knows my family well. He's very calm, honest, and a very caring person. I hanged out with him for a little bit, and after that bit, he went to the washroom that's in the middle of the house. We were in the lower part where the kitchen is. When he went in, my sister told us to hide from him. We turned off the downstairs lights and we hid there. We could still see the lights by the washroom, and the only place with a light at the moment. When he comes out of the washroom, he immediately looks upstairs as if he's seen something, and then he suddenly goes up. We got confused, so we followed him upstairs. When he sees me, he freaks out, and he said he had seen someone go upstairs when he got off the washroom. I told him that it wasn't possible as I was downstairs. He got really nervous and insisted he saw someone taller walk upstairs towards the last room, which was my sister's room. He got scared and just stormed out. We thought he was messing with us, so we didn't think much of it. Later that night, we went to bed and forgot all about it. It was a bit after 12 a.m. when I started hearing screams. I got so scared, thinking that maybe someone was robbing the house and my sister had seen them. I didn't even have a bat or something, but I ran towards my sister's room. When I get there, I see that the one screaming was my sister's friend. She was crying a lot and touching her neck. She started saying that my older brother came in the room and started choking her. I was so confused, so I called my brother. I called his friend's house. At the time, cell phones were not common. My brother said that he hadn't been to the house at all and that he would never do something like that. He kept on saying, "That's sick. Why would I do that?" I told my sister and her friend that I doubted that it was my brother and that he's the one who did it. But she kept insisting that she saw a taller guy who started choking her and saying random things to her. I asked her what he was saying, and she said that he kept yelling, "Why didn't you pray at 12?" Suddenly, they both stopped talking and stared at each other. I was so confused, so I asked them what was happening. My sister then tells me that earlier that day, they had been playing with a Ouija board. Turns out they had been talking to a guy who said he had died in a car accident the year before. This guy gave them his name and a phone number, and he asked them to call them and tell the person on the phone that he was okay. They called, and the person who picked up the phone got really upset. Turns out it was the guy's mother, and she thought they were calling to prank her about her son's death. Later in that session, he asked them to pray for him at 12 a.m. so he could be in peace, but they didn't. Ever since my parents got to the house, weird things happened. However, after this incident, things got way worse. Ooh, yeah, that is a bit creepy. I mean, if you would assume that it's real, ooh, it's creepy. But again, like, it's a few alarm bells in here. For example, whenever like a Ouija board comes in, I'm like... You know, it always has like a feeling of like a 1920s seance. It has this weird esoteric touch to it. Not to say that there are no, I mean, I've seen a few videos of like Ouija board sessions that are really, really creepy. Not to say there's nothing to it, but also that like they contact a guy with the Ouija board that died a year ago or something, or last year, and he gives them a name and a phone number. He's like, you go with the letters, call this number. He's like texting. He's like, you know, it's a bit, it just kind of doesn't sound as feasible. I don't know. Creepy nonetheless, but maybe a little less credible. I don't know. Let's move on. So this one's called A Small Haunting. I used to live in this house in Newbury Park, California, and it's the only time I've ever experienced anything like a ghost. There are two stories, one is mine and the other is my mother's. Ironically, I was reading ghost stories at the time when I experienced this as a kid, and they freaked me out so much that when I heard loud footsteps coming up the hallway, I was relieved. It was someone to talk to get rid of the creepy feeling. I went out, nothing. Nobody. I went through the entire house just to find an explanation, nobody. I was starting to get creeped out, but I figured someone might have just gone into their room, so I checked everybody by opening their doors, and they were so fast asleep that they didn't even stir. I can't think of an explanation for what I clearly heard, and not finding a source for it. My mother's story is even better. She ran a daycare at our house, so we had a playroom for the kids with toys, typical kid stuff. She frequently heard a toy going off in the middle of the night, and only the middle of the night. One she couldn't even identify. We didn't even own electric/battery operated toys that could do that at the time. Just stuffed animals, plastic toys. She never found the toy either. So, small time stuff. But they creeped me out and convinced me ghosts are real. I understand. If that would have happened to me, that would have creeped me out as well. But would that convince me that ghosts are real? I am not sure. I mean, a toy that makes noises at night, always in the middle of the night, can be just a coincidence with a technical fault in some toy. And yes, they didn't have electric toys. Sure, I mean, that adds a layer to it, but it might be just somewhere in a little corner where they didn't notice. Maybe one of the kids in the daycare brought the toy, they didn't notice, left it there, something like that. I think that is more likely than it being paranormal. And with the footsteps, I mean, that is creepy, admittedly. I've never encountered anything like that, and maybe it would change my mind if I really would encounter it. But again, there can be so many explanations, you know, piping, old wooden boards. It could just be wood creaking that sounds like footsteps. It's tricky. But there's, for example, a great episode, and you can watch that, of BuzzFeed Unsolved. It's the one where they are in New Orleans and they're staying in this hotel room. And one of the two boys, he can just keep hearing footsteps, and he records this as well, like above his hotel room all night. And it's clear footsteps. It's someone with heavy boots walking back and forth. Next day he goes up, asks the guy in the room, like, and he's like, yeah, I heard it too. I wasn't walking around, that wasn't me, but in my room, I also heard someone walking around. Obviously, footsteps are a very commonly described phenomenon of hauntings or poltergeists or any paranormal activity in your house. So, if so many people report it, I'm sure there must be something to it. But if you say the only two experiences you ever had is once you heard some footsteps and the other time some toy came on in the middle of the night, I'm not sure that holds up in the court of the paranormal, whatever that is. So this one is called My Ghost Story. I remember in my old house, I would always see a man in my doorway, but he wouldn't do anything. Otherwise, I would just see things moving around the corner of my eye, so I moved downstairs into a small room and I kept seeing him, but I would never see anything in my room and he would never go into my room. I don't know what happened, but somehow that room was like a safe room for me. But a week before we moved out, an old friend of my dad's came over and we looked at the house, and she said that there was an old man on a bucket in our attic. After we moved out, one of my family members moved into our old house with my aunt's boyfriend. Always sees a man and he loves to scare him. Now I think that he was watching me and maybe protecting me because the man only scares him. Right. I mean, it's written completely without punctuation. I don't think that is someone who's very much in love with writing and like telling a coherent story. I think really someone is just telling their story. And ironically, I had a friend that went to school with me when I was small. And funny enough, I went also to school with his sister, who was a bit older. Sometimes I was in class with her, sometimes I was in class with him. So independently of each other, those two people, my friend and his sister, told me a similar story. They told me that they saw a man walking in their house around at night, and they were dead serious. Like, it's not like, look, we're like 15 or whatever. I was interested in ghost stories at the time, so I asked them. I asked many of my friends if they ever experienced anything. And funny enough, like, those two people, independently of each other, told me those similar stories after I dug a bit. Right? So I was like, no, tell me more. What do you mean a man? What is that? So I really had to kind of dig in to get like the bits of the story out. And he said like sometimes he would see him just walking down the stairs into the basement, like a man with a beard. And sometimes he would see him sitting in his living room, like, his living room, his parents' living room, but always the same man. Sometimes he would hear him laughing a bit or something, but he wouldn't talk, he wouldn't do anything, he would just calmly walk around the house. Funny enough, and this is a true story, okay, this happened in the village I grew up in. The house that they were living in was built on the place where the graveyard was before it was moved somewhere else. Like, it's a very old village, it's like from 1400 or something. So in that time, that was like the graveyard. Later it was relocated, but where their house is now, that's where it originally was. And I know that for a fact. I don't know if that has anything to do with their story, but it is a creepy story. And always when I walk past that house, I'm like, ooh, gives me goose pimples. Let's see if we can find another one. So this one is called Shared Nightmare. This is a long one, so my apologies in advance. Actually, it's not that long. I'll start by admitting my long-time interest in all things paranormal or unexplained, since omitting this piece of information seems disingenuous. Having said that, I must also add that deep down, I never really truly believed any of it. Thank you, that makes you very sympathetic. It's exactly like me. I've had a lifelong fascination with the unexplained. But do I believe it? Do I run around and propagate it to friends and say, hey, you really should, read this is the truth and ghosts are real? I don't do that. I'm not sure I can believe in it, but I have a healthy curiosity for it. I enjoyed the curiosity stories and captures provided, but would always convince myself that there was a rational explanation, even if I couldn't come up with one at the time. Now, with the necessary disclaimers out of the way, let's get to the point. About a year ago, my husband and I moved into a recently renovated apartment in the town I grew up in. The building is well over 100 years old and had been run down and filled with a rotating cast of drug dealers and users most of my life, so it was nice to see it return to its former glory. Shortly after moving in, I noticed occasional odd noises, movement out of the corner of my eye, etc., but I chalked it up to an old house and unfamiliar territory. I couldn't help noticing the dog was reacting to these things as well, but again, I convinced myself I was being childish and put it out of my mind as much as possible. Fast forward several months into our lease, I'm asleep in the bedroom with my husband and our dog. Around 2 a.m., I startled awake from an incredibly vivid nightmare. Very shaken up. In the dream, I had awoken much the same and wandered out of my room for a drink. As I crossed into the space between the kitchen and the living room, I see the outline of a woman on the couch. My eyes haven't quite adjusted to the light, so it takes a moment to see her clearly, and when I do, I'm both horrified and confused by what I can only describe as her corpse-like appearance. Just as what I'm seeing really starts to set in, she sits up and says, "It's time." And then I wake up. I laid there awake and uneasily for some time before coming to the conclusion there was no way I'd be able to fall asleep unless I checked the living room to make sure it was a dream. So I reluctantly climbed out of my bed, headed down the hallway, just as I did in my nightmare, but this time, of course, nobody was on the couch. Having confirmed this, I calmed myself down and crawled back into my bed, feeling slightly stupid for getting so worked up. However, just as I settle in, my husband sits up, seemingly still asleep, and he says, "Is she here?" I turn to him and ask who, to which he replies, "The lady on the couch." Cue me coming out of my skin and vowing never to sleep again. Now I'm sure some of you are thinking, yeah, you probably said something in your sleep and he overheard it and he mixed it into his dream. And that might be a reasonable explanation, except my husband is deaf. I have rolled this around in my brain for weeks, and I can't come up with a satisfactory answer, so any insight or advice is welcome. Wow, okay, so the husband is deaf, okay, that kind of added a nice little touch to it in the end, right? Like, it's not possible for him to overhear this. It's stories I've heard before. Like, I know firsthand of a person that had like pictures fall off the wall in the moment people died, or where people had a bad relationship with the person, but in one particular moment, seemingly random, the person is like, oh, I wish I could be with that person now. Children, for example, and exactly in that moment that person died. So there seem to be these kind of connections. This applies to dreams. I mean, it might be just a writing exercise of a literature student or something, but if it's true, and it does sound like at least that person believes she experienced it, it's creepy, man. And I think stuff like this can happen. Dreams can connect. Moments can connect in ways that we can't really understand. It's fascinating. I don't think this person made it up. That's just my feeling anyway. But it is absolutely possible that something that she did shaped his dream subconsciously. It is absolutely possible. Who knows? So let's read one more. This one is called "My Grandma's House is Haunted, but We're Not Allowed to Tell Her." My grandma's house has always, for as long as I can remember, been a scary place. My dad and aunt and uncle all grew up in the house and had paranormal experiences occur throughout their lives. One example was when my dad and uncle were teenagers, my uncle was walking down the steps and was swinging a towel as he had just washed his hair. Out of nowhere, my dad, who was standing in the living room at the bottom of the stairs, saw the towel straighten out in front of my uncle as if someone pulled it, and my uncle fell forcefully down the stairs. Now, my grandma hates all things paranormal, especially Ouija boards, and she would often visit gypsies, so it is a big no-no for our family to discuss the paranormal events that occurred in her house. 20 years or so ago, my cousin and brothers were playing in the upstairs bedroom of my grandparents' house. The toys were set up in the room across the hall from them, and they were all in the same bedroom playing a board game. Out of nowhere, a Hot Wheels car, with no batteries or wind-up, just an average Hot Wheels car, slowly exited the room that the toys were in, went across the hall and into the room where they were all sitting. Needless to say, they were all terrified. Around 8 years ago, my older brother moved into the basement of their house. Does that sound like a good idea when you hear those stories? I'm going to move into the basement of that place. It's a bit creepy, but I mean, you know, it's a basement. I'm going to just move into there. Jesus, who comes up with these ideas? One night when he was home alone, he woke up out of a deep sleep, having felt like he was shaken by someone. He stood up and instantly smelled gas. He went upstairs, and outside of the house, later he found out that there was a carbon monoxide leak, and if he had not woken up, there's a big chance that he would have died in his sleep. Months after that, when my grandparents were away for the weekend, the family decided to try the Ghost Radar app in the house. We all sat around the phone, and my uncle asked the normal question, "Is anyone here? Blah, blah, blah." But then he asked, "Who used to live in the basement?" At this point, my brother had moved out. So the Ghost Radar replied with my brother's full name, which no one ever calls him. We were shocked, so my uncle asked, "How did you save him, my brother?" It replied with, "Wake." Ooh, WTF. He then asked, "What did you save him from?" And it said, "Gas." Brew. Needless to say, we were shocked. The last thing that I'm going to talk about that happened in the house is my grandparents' friend's obituary, who passed away probably 15 years ago. It will show up in the kitchen every month or so. They usually say hello to their friend and put the obituary back in the basement where it's supposed to stay. LOL. A little while later it will show back up in the kitchen. Sorry that was long, but there's more stories. Right, okay, it's a good story. It's a good story. They lost me a little bit in the last third, right, where they talk about, you know, they're using the Ghost Radar app. Okay, like, okay, you gotta understand, I have no belief in any of that, you know, EMF meters and whatever people are using to prove ghosts. There's just absolutely no evidence for it. You can measure an increase in electromagnetic frequency, but I mean, what does this app do anyway? What functionality of my device does the Ghost Radar app use to detect ghosts and turn whatever they want to say into little written words? And when he says, you know, first we asked him, you know, who did you save? And then he puts the name of the brother into the ghost app, like with his full name. And then he goes further, like, how did you save him? Wake, I woke him up. What did you save him from? From gas? Bit too many coincidences. You know what I mean? And then he also ends it with, sorry, but there's more stories. It's like, hey, if you want me to make up more, I can make up more for you. That it does sound a bit like that to me. And you see, that's exactly the problem. If you wouldn't have done that, if you wouldn't have brought in like the ghost app stuff in the end where it just gives perfect reply after perfect reply, I would have probably fallen for it. But like that, it seems a bit dodgy. Anyway, guys, that's it for today. Episode 2 of Reading Reddit. We did read the Ghost Story subreddit today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got spooked out a little bit with my crazy effort of decoration that I did and the incredibly expensive light effects that I put into place for you guys to get spooked out properly. If you enjoyed it, smash the like button underneath there. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, do all the things. I hope to see you again. I'm going to do more of those. And next time, I promise, it's not going to be a spooky one. We're going to read another subreddit, and it's going to probably be ridiculous. I hope to see you in the next one again. Thanks for watching, guys. Take care, be safe, and I'm out. Bye.